Welcome to the Blue White Breakdown presented by PennLive. Johnny McGonigal here, Max Ralph there. It's Monday, July 14th, and Max just got done talking to Chuck Losey, strength and conditioning coach for Penn State at the Lash Building earlier today. As we record this on Monday afternoon, Max, we were recording this. We typically record Mondays at noon, and obviously we have our live shows Thursday at noon, but we're recording this one a little later on Monday, so you had the opportunity to check out a bunch of the guys in the facility, lifting, getting after it, and then obviously talk to Chuck Losey, strength and conditioning coach for Penn State, about some of the updates, some of the new stuff that we may hear from him. I'm sure that you heard from him. But before we get to that, later in the show we'll be discussing the new college football game. I've played it extensively, Max. I don't think you've dove in yet, but the Penn State player ratings are out, and we can take a look at those. But before anything else, Max, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing all right, Johnny. Anybody who is an avid watcher of our podcasts, rather than just listening on Spotify, Apple Music, what have you, you may notice my background is a little barren today.
No Gengar. Where's it at?
I know. Well, I've got moving coming up next week. I'm switching apartments here in the near future, so getting a head start by taking everything off the walls, and it feels a little bit like I'm in a prison cell these days with just the gray walls around me. But we're inside of a week before we move, and actually I've got some time off coming up, so even the next time you'll see me on a podcast is going to be in the new setup. So a little stressed, we'll put it that way, but a lot going on. So not all bad.
Good. Well, at least as long as Gengar is making the trip.
Gengar will be there.
Hell yeah. All right. We love it. For anyone who's joining and hasn't listened to one of our previous podcasts, Max had it's a Pokemon
Yes.
character. Is it a plush toy?
Yeah, it's actually like a coin purse. But yeah, it's a plush. Yeah, it's a little plush Gengar. So yeah.
All right,
pretty cool.
So
you got it for free. So anyway, yeah.
Anyway, so Chuck Losey, how was
he? Chuck was doing well. Yeah. So basically, we got about a half hour maybe of weight room access to see offensive, defensive linemen and linebackers do some lifting today. And then afterward, we got a chance to meet with Chuck Losey and Andrew Nelson, one of the performance and nutrition science leaders over at Penn State. I spent my time with Chuck Losey and had, I'll get a recording of Nelson later and be able to talk about it at a later date. But Chuck was doing well. And kind of the interesting first thing that he was asked and talked about was, how far along are they right now compared to where they want to be for camp and all that comes with that? And basically said, this was a high intensity week. Next week, we're going to be testing. And I mean, we're into the thick of it. I mean, camp starts in 2 weeks. And what he said was, we're probably peaking as far as our strength and conditioning goes right now. So pretty interesting. We certainly saw some good weight being thrown around. Some definitely good weight being thrown around. I thought a few of the lifting groups in particular were interesting. Got our first look at reclassified freshman defensive lineman Daniel Jennings, and a couple of thoughts from Losey on him. He was working with 2 other summer enrollee defensive ends, Cortez Harris and Chaz Coleman. That lifting group really interesting to me. Anthony Donko and Nolan Rucci, who obviously have a pretty big position battle coming up between the two of them. They lift together, which a good sign that, probably not a lot of hard feelings depending on whoever wins that out. They spend a lot of time together. Certainly an interesting one. Saw Amari Campbell doing some work in the weight room for the first time, the transfer from North Carolina. He was working with Anthony Specca. A couple of good things. For Jennings specifically, as I think he's kind of front of mind for me, and probably a lot of fans, considering he was the last piece to enroll of this 2025 team. They're not rushing him by any means. Chuck Losey said, we still kind of have to figure out what's going on with him. I mean, he just got here, but they like the baseline. He can be a productive kid. Interestingly enough, Jennings was a defensive end in high school, I believe listed as a defensive end on Penn State's roster right now. But the two players that he compared Jennings to, Losey, he said Zane Durant and Xavier Gilliam. Obviously, both defensive tackles, so they have very similar body types. Maybe that projects for a defensive tackle role down the line for a guy like Daniel Jennings, which is an interesting thing because a highly productive defensive end out of West Virginia in high school came in early, and yeah, we got to see him. And I will say, legs look the part. Dude's got some tree trunks down there. Certainly, some maturing needs to happen to the frame. I mean, that's to be expected of any 17-year-old kid hopping into a Division I weight room, but definitely some growth to be had there, and a really good frame. You know, he was throwing some weight around too. Impressive for just getting there. So I really think that Chuck Losey and the rest of the strength staff are excited to get their hands on him and be able to mold him a little bit more.
That's interesting. Defensive tackle. Well, it's not like Chuck said he's going to be a defensive tackle down the line, but the fact that he maybe compares to both of those guys who, we know Zane Durant is more of viewed at least as kind of an undersized, at least in terms of weight, defensive tackle, but that explosiveness on the interior is what makes him such a good player. And Daniel Jennings, and not to make that jump, but I mean, one of the reasons why Penn State liked him so much in the 2026 class and ultimately reclassifies to 25 was his explosiveness off the edge. So maybe that is a future path for Daniel Jennings down the line. But anyone else stand out to you, or in terms of anything else Chuck said, strike a chord with you, Max?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there's a lot of guys that stand out to us because we're in this position in the summer where we don't really see a lot of the players face to face a whole lot in the summer months until they get into fall camp. Two guys that I wanted to highlight that have been pretty interesting just to see the way that their bodies have transformed. And again, a disclaimer that we only saw a handful of position groups between the linemen on both sides and the linebackers. But Owen Alasine and Brady O'Hara, two offensive linemen who are coming in, they have put on weight very quickly. Alasine, I know, was one of Phil Troutwine's favorite guys from the spring this year, the early enrollee. He really looks filled out well. Brady O'Hara is getting to that point. And, he's got a 6'6" frame that can definitely take it. But, he played tight end in high school and still has some room to grow. Just got onto campus this summer. One thing Chuck was asked about that I thought was really interesting, he was asked which summer freshmen that have just gotten to campus impressed him most. Malachi Goodman, the offensive tackle who's come in, and that one backs up the eye test. And Malachi is massive. He's just a really big kid. If he can, if he can continue to build and make that build the muscle portion of all of this, he will really be able to impact this team quickly. And then the other one that's interesting and good news for Penn State is the other defensive ends, Chaz Coleman and Cortez Harris. He said those two have come in and done a really good job so far. And I spent a lot of time watching them work out together. Those two, as well as Daniel Jennings, were in a lifting group together, which I found interesting as well. And yeah, I mean, they look good. Cortez Harris and Chaz Coleman both in really good shape, and excited to see what those guys can do. And then the last thing that I had, I think that's front of mind for me right now, linebacker Tony Rojas, who missed this spring with injury, was out there and he was lifting and he looked fine. And then Chuck Losey was asked about him, and very flatly, Chuck said, Rojas has been fantastic. He's done everything, and I'm really excited for the year he's going to have. Johnny, I know that's somebody who you've been on top of quite a bit here this offseason about a guy who could burst onto the scene this year. It sounds like that really is, he's poised for that and looks healthy.
Yeah, I really think the sky's the limit with Tony Rojas. So hearing that, from Chuck Losey is not a surprise at all. We kind of knew that he was going to be, healthy and cleared and good, for training camp. James Franklin told us that. I guess it was a little more than a month ago now at this point. He's in that group of guys who, missed spring ball, but, it was more of a postseason cleanup, surgery from what he was dealing with throughout, towards the tail end of last season. And we saw flashes of what he could do. Obviously the interception against SMU comes to mind, but he made splash plays last year. It was just the little things like just being out of position sometimes. Maybe his mind racing too quickly for his body, or vice versa, right? Like a little over eager to make a big play. But the physical tools and traits are absolutely there. And talking to Dan Connor, the linebackers coach, like he thinks the sky's the limit for Tony. I think if you asked anyone on that defense, they would say the same thing, whether it's players or staff members. Tony Rojas has a real chance to explode in a good way this upcoming season. Interesting note there about Malachi Goodman, Max, because he was one of the highest rated players in that 2025 class, if not the highest rated. 5-star guy, number 19, player overall in the country by 24/7 Sports. And so, he's not a guy on that offensive line that you would expect to make an impact right away, given, how many veterans are in that group and they return 4 or 5 starters. And we kind of figure Cooper Cousins is going to slot right in there and be that 5th guy. But looking down the line, 2026, 2027, Malachi Goodman is definitely a name to know.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the thing with Tony Rojas. He's a name that we've been all over, that a lot of people have been all over on the staff. The other one last guy that Chuck Losey brought up, he was asked, who has kind of proven themselves as a leader this year. Obviously, team brings back so many seniors, a couple of 5th-year guys. Leadership is really in place this year, maybe more than any other year in James Franklin's tenure. But the first name that popped out of Chuck Losey's mouth was Zachy Wheatley, who obviously has a lot of hype around him. But it appears that even further, even beyond the on-field stuff that he's been able to do and the way he's improved in his career, it sounds like the off-the-field stuff is really coming with it too. And Chuck Losey, being the strength coach and being the guy who's around all of these players the most in the summer, he gets a really good feel for guys who are going to be leaders, for guys who can step into those roles. It's good news to see Zachy Wheatley doing that, because the defense definitely needs it. The secondary needs it. And it's just, it was the next step for him. So it's all good news.
Yeah, that feels like a natural fit in terms of a leadership role for Zachy, not only being there for so long, but playing a lot of really good football for Penn State over the years. I still remember, the plays he was making as a freshman. He was the takeaway king really from the jump that he got to State College. I still remember that game at Auburn, him and Jalen Reed combining on a big play on a turnover. And Jalen Reed's not there anymore. KJ Winston's not there anymore. We expect big things from AJ Harris and Elliott Washington in the corners. But in terms of being a voice, in terms of being, a leader, you want it from that safety position. And Zachy is firmly in position to do that. He might even have the green dot, in terms of the helmet communication. There's a chance, because I remember talking to Dan Connor last month, and he was asked if Tony was going to have the green dot, if Dom DeLuca, and he said, it might be a linebacker, it might be a safety, it might be a defensive end. Denai Dennis Sutton is a veteran, but I don't think they would give it to a D end. I don't know if that would make a whole lot of sense, but it would for a safety, and it does for linebackers, which you typically see.
Yeah.
But Zachy Wheatley is due for a really big year, and there's a lot of expectations on him. I feel like, when we talk about the guys who came back to make a run at winning a national title, obviously we always lead off with Drew Aller, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, Denai Dennis Sutton, and Zane Durant normally gets in there too. But Zachy, I feel like, gets left out sometimes, and he shouldn't. He's a really good player and a really big piece of this team.
Yeah, I think it's probably a product of the fact that he's not a part of that 2022 class. He came in 2021, right. And also maybe the fact that just being truthful, his NFL draft stock was not as high as those guys when he decided to come back. Would he have gotten drafted? Maybe, because he's got a bit of a projectable build, probably a fringe guy at best, but he is a really key piece of this puzzle. And, when we're talking about him next year, I do think it's going to be him being a draft pick in somewhere in the NFL. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up what we saw today. I'll have a post up on PennLive, with some of the big notes that I mentioned here and a couple of other things that, I might not have remembered, or stuff from Andrew Nelson that I didn't get right away off the bat. So make sure you go check that out. It'll be pretty succinct and some good stuff from our session today.
Awesome. Love to hear it, Max. Let's flip into EA Sports College Football 26. I cannot believe you haven't played yet.
Oh, I know.
You must have a life. You must have a life, which is good for you. But,
the secret, Johnny, the secret is I bought a new game on my Switch. I've been playing Super Mario Odyssey, and yes, I'm 6 years late to it, but I've been really enjoying it. and it's taken a back seat. So I just have to be honest there. But I'm going to get to the new college football, and I do really enjoy it. So I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I'm sure you're going to have that. So, Penn State fans, we have a like shared online dynasty
Yes.
that we did last year
Yeah.
with us two, with John Sauber of the Center Daily Times, of Daniel Gallen of 24/7 Sports, among others, which is always fun. And I know that's going to be booting up soon, so you better
Yeah.
download the game
Yeah, it
soon.
is. Yeah, it is.
Um,
Probably tonight, Johnny. Probably tonight.
I love it. I love it. Well, look, if you can't tell, I've been on it, maybe a little bit too much, but it's been a lot of fun. Some really cool additions in the game. I think, just the gameplay is really good. I had to check out some of like the little additions, like the pregame at Virginia Tech, and they put Enter Sandman in there.
Yeah.
That was really cool to see, like just to see in a video game. I think they did it really well. And of course, I played a couple of games with Penn State just to like get a feel and see, like, all right, like who do they get right, who do they get wrong? Take a look at the
Yeah.
player ratings, which I have up here, Max.
Yeah, I've pulled it up as well. I'm going right alongside you.
All right, so let's start at quarterback. Let's just here's kind of what I want to do. I just kind of want to discuss, where these where Penn State's players are rated and ranked in the game, which can change and will change, with roster
Yeah.
updates and everything. But just kind of what we think, maybe guys who are overlooked, underrated, or got a really good score and they deserve it. So I don't know. I'll start off with you. If you're just scrolling through, you pick where we want to start here. Is there a name or a position group that kind of jumps out to you?
You made note of this in the story you published with all the ratings, Johnny, but I think we really need to talk about the offensive line for Penn State,
Yeah.
because Venga Ioane is among one of the top 100 players in the game, 92 overall, great player. I think that's fair. But what are we doing with Anthony Donko and even Drew Shelton and Nolan Rucci? I mean, all these guys seem severely underappreciated, and obviously it's a video game and it doesn't necessarily have a ton of reflection for how these things are viewed nationally, but EA gets input from a lot of different people to make these ratings. And to me, this is a reflection that Penn State's offensive line is probably severely underrated, especially some of these big pieces, because Nolan Rucci at an 82, Drew Shelton at an 81, and Anthony Donko at a 77. I don't know where that puts them among offensive tackles, like in the Big Ten or nationally. You may have that number, Johnny. I don't know, but that's certainly too low in my opinion.
I don't have those numbers off the rip, but I do know that a 77 is insanely low for Donko in particular. I mean, that guy was so good for Penn State's offensive line last year, prior to getting hurt. Really, it was late November at Minnesota that he sustained that injury. And I guess maybe they just forgot about him, or they forgot how.
Yeah.
I don't really know. I will say, playing with Penn State in a game or two, I thought the computer version of Drew Aller was under pressure way more than he would in real life.
Yeah.
And I think the offensive line ratings there kind of bear that out. Like I don't understand the tackle stuff there. I mean, even like, I don't know, Nick Dawkins at an 80, I guess feels, I mean, he could have been a little bit higher. Cooper Cousins at an 80 could have been a little higher. That's one where I think with roster updates, Cooper Cousins is going to get a pretty big jump.
Oh, that's going to be a big one.
That's going to be a big jump. One thing that stood out to me is, they love Penn State's transfer wide receivers.
Yes.
Devontae Ross at a 90, Trebor Payne at an 89, Kyron Hudson at an 83. You got Liam Clifford at 83. And you got Caden Saunders 79, Tyseer Denmark 76. The list goes on there. But Devontae Ross and Trebor Payne are fun to play with in this game. And I think Drew Aller would like that to translate into real life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think some love for Penn State's defensive line as well, for a position group that we have a lot of questions about. I mean, obviously, Denied Dennis Sutton is fantastic and reflected as so in the game, but pretty good rating for Zariah Fisher at an 83, and even Anai White as well, the transfer at an 80. I think those numbers are, you're probably pretty happy with if those guys can play up to those standards. Especially if Zariah Fisher is an 83 and Drew Shelton is an 81. I think that that's a pretty good guess on how good they think Zariah Fisher is. In that comparison.
Yeah, I don't understand Max Granville at a 74.
Yeah,
I know you'll go to bat for your fellow Max.
of course.
Obviously it hurts in real life to not have him for this upcoming season, or at least we think upcoming season. We know that it's a long-term injury that he's dealing with. James Franklin let us know that back in June. So a difficult injury to deal with there, but I thought he flashed enough to gain a little bit of a higher ranking there. Zane Durant with a deserved 90. I'm just looking down the defense now. Rojas 86, Amari Campbell 85, Dominic DeLuca 83. At corner, AJ Harris 91. He cracked the top 100 players in the game among the best corners in the game. Elliot Washington 83. Zaki Wheatley with a 90. Dejon Lane with a 79. That's one that I think
Yeah,
could also get a pretty big jump in season with an in-season update, because I think Dejon Lane is kind of a really big role in this defense, in Jim Knowles' defense that likes to use 5 DBs, and I think we're going to see a pretty good amount of like 3 safety looks
yeah,
with Jim Knowles' scheme. But you have the big hitters, obviously Nick Singleton 93, Katron Allen 92, Aller 92. So it's a fun offense to play with.
yeah,
I
yeah.
will say that it is a
I've
fun
heard,
offense to play with.
I've heard, and like I said, I haven't played the game yet, but I've heard the playbooks are a blast, and I'm sure Andy Kotelnicki's is among the best.
They do have like linemen split out wide. They
Yeah,
have the motions. They have all of it. They did a
pretty
pretty
cool.
good job. They did
That's
a pretty
pretty
good
cool.
job, creating Andy Kotelnicki's quirky playbook
Yeah,
and different sets and formations. So it's not all vanilla by any means.
yeah.
It is very much very interesting.
And as you said, Johnny, when you were talking about the wide receivers, if any of this translates to real life, Penn State fans are probably going to be pretty darn happy.
They are. They are indeed. Yeah, sending Devontae Ross on a fly route is a cheat code in the game.
Yeah,
I will tell anyone that if anyone hasn't booted up the game and is going to, just send Devontae Ross on a fly route or a jet sweep, and it's almost a guaranteed success every single time.
yeah, love it.
So yeah. Max, I think that's all I got for you because until you play the game, I can't dive into it much further than that.
That's right. That's right. Just know, as you said, when we're playing our dynasty for all those, maybe 2 or 3 people who care, I'm playing as Bowling Green, so very excited. It will be tough with no Harold Fannin. We'll move forward though. Johnny, I don't know if you switched which team you were playing with this year, but
Delaware, roll hens.
oh, the Blue Hens, baby, the
Fighting
Blue Hens.
Fighting Blue
I
Hens, fighting Joe Flacco's. Yeah, they're so I
That's
they
that's
rank the
brutal.
teams, they rank the programs with like stars. So like Penn State, I think is like a 4.5 or a 5-star program or whatever. Delaware is a 1-star program.
Yeah.
It's their first year in FBS.
Yep.
It's going to be a build, and I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I plan, for your information, I plan on using Delaware in another online dynasty with some other friends. So we'll be in the struggle side by side.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome, Max. Well, hey, thanks for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Love the update from the Lash building with what Chuck
Yeah.
Losey had to say. Again, Max is going to have some more details, from that session up online on PennLive.com later today. It might be out by the time you listen to this,
Mhm.
and we'll be back Thursday at noon, live podcast. Send us your questions, like come in, during the live stream and drop your questions, comments, whatever. And we will field them and talk about them on the show. But for now, this is Johnny McGonigal, Max Ralph, Blue White Breakdown presented by PennLive. Have a good day.